Hello again, and thanks for joining us. I'm Kevin Steele. Nice to have you with us on Southeast Texas Weekly. Talking politics once again, our favorite subject here on every couple of weeks on Southeast Texas Weekly. And joining me to do that, Jeffrey Lewis, the precinct chair 27 with the Republican Party, and Dr. Bruce Drury with Lamar University for several years and all-around progressive Democrat activist. What would be the right way to put it? Not so much activist, but expert, perhaps.
Well, I have a little of that, but basically I'm here as a political scientist to play it straight and to lead the truth.
Fellows, we had an historic election. By almost any account, this has been an extraordinary election just a couple of nights ago. Overall, let's just do the broad question. How do you see the landscape in Washington now that this election is over? Who were the big winners, the losers, the guys in the middle?
Well, obviously the Republicans won straight down the line. They took control of the House with a huge victory. They did not take control of the Senate, but made at least some advances. State legislators went Republican. Republicans gained tremendously in governor's mansions. So it's very much a sea change from what had been a relatively comfortable Democratic government to now one that's mixed, but with a great deal of power on the Republican side, especially in the states. And one key to that is that the Texas legislature will have 99 Republican members of the House of Representatives. And
up from what, 75 or so?
From 75.
Okay.
Or 76, I think.
Okay, and that's a pretty substantial shift even on the state level.
Yeah, and if you look at the list of those who were defeated, a number of well-known folks dropped out of the state legislature and dropped out of the Texas delegation of Congress. Jed Edwards being the most significant example.
Also Solomon Ortiz.
In Central Texas. Solomon Ortiz as well in what, South Texas or Corpus Christi area?
He's down about a point. It hasn't been called yet, I don't believe, but he's about 1-2% down with all the vote-ins. So.
Yeah, you're right. Very well put. Those were some remarkable races. You get a chance to gloat for a moment, Mr. Lewis.
I'm not here to gloat. I'm here to just talk about what real...
What happened the other night?
Well, I like the way the president put it myself, the shellacking, but...
That sounds like gloating.
Personally...
I'll need a ruling out there, but it's... Okay, go ahead, go ahead.
Personally, I think that this is a time to take a step back and reconsider where we are.
Okay.
Republicans won solid victories across the nation, both the House and Senate. Also, we've turned probably a good 10 to 11 state legislatures as well. That's huge, with redistricting coming up, of course. But what we really need to think about is, how do we get here? We got here because the Democrats failed to govern from the center. And the Republicans need to take that message and say, wait a second, we just won a sweeping victory, but we need to govern and not get into the partisan bickering that we've seen from the Obama administration the last couple of years.
Did Democrats really fail to govern from the center, Dr. Drury?
They did not govern smart. I don't know whether it's... and they were indeed left of center, but there are arguments to one side that the Obama administration was too ambitious. There was another argument that they were too cautious, that tried to work out some sort of compromise arrangement with the Republicans, and the result delayed a lot of major programs that they wanted. And when they did not get the cooperation, it's basically too late to use the votes that they had in Congress at the time. Now they don't have those votes.
I'm so glad to have a scholarly political scientist with us in this context. When President Bill Clinton governed from the center, he got welfare reform passed, he got some legislation passed. Would the Obama administration have been far more successful to have governed more from the center as the Clinton administration did?
Well, Clinton didn't do that until he absorbed that defeat or Democratic defeat in '94. And then he moved more toward the center triangulation. Whether Obama can do that or not, it's not particularly clear.
Interesting. Would the Clinton administration have done that without the Republican Revolution of '94? Would he have
been able to do...
Been a centrist? Or would he have...
Clinton was more of a centrist all the way along, much more so than Obama. So it wasn't terribly difficult for him to
wasn't
move in that
completely
direction.
forced into it by the Republicans.
No. And he had the advantage of the Republican majority in the House after 1995 being led by Newt Gingrich, who had more in the way of personal ambitions probably than interest in governing.
Is he going to run for president?
Yes.
Probably.
Okay. Final word. He said yes.
Among 20 or so.
We have it now. And I would have agree with you, by the way, as well. Was it a shellacking, Jeffrey Lewis, of the president or of the Democratic cause, or both?
I would point out something that Dr. Drew just said. I don't think it was a matter, Doctor, of ambitious. I don't think it was a matter of cautious. I think it was a matter of, when you're talking about 10% unemployment, I think it's a matter of a failed agenda. And you can't sit here and spin it later and say that, well, we did a good job, we tried as hard as we can, you screwed up, you didn't get done what was important in this country, and that was creating jobs. You put in a tremendous health care bill that just totally... Do you realize that 44% of our economy is now controlled by the United States government, combined with the federal and state and local governments? We're at 44%. That's 17, up from 17 to 7 in the top 20 nations.
The president has argued that this matter of 10% unemployment was, this train was on this track long before he came to this position of power.
If you do the math on it, if you do the math on it, it's like President Bush was speeding 77 miles an hour in a 65 zone, and then Obama gets behind the wheel, and he steps on the accelerator, and we go up to 176 miles an hour.
And how did he do that?
If you want to compare a $300 billion deficit to a $1.4 trillion deficit and explain that to American people, go right ahead, Doctor.
What was the accelerator there? What did he do to push America?
Increased spending across the board. We had this massive stimulus bill that had absolutely nothing to do with stimulus. It was nothing more than pork projects pushed by Speaker Pelosi, who I'm glad to say is finally gone. Thank you. You know, there's a lot
had a feeling you might say that.
Were you shocked?
Had a feeling you might say that.
But we had a lot of stuff that just had nothing to do with governing and had everything to do with pet projects. It was the most corrupt Congress that we've seen in probably the last quarter century, and yet it was billed when you came in as the most transparent and, you know, flower-throwing Congress that we'd ever going to have.
Dr. Drew, let me ask you this.
I would question his word of corrupt.
Okay, you're going to debate the word corrupt.
I don't want to get in that type of debate, but that is a term that he can't justify. And so he's throwing out partisan stuff.
Well, and we talked about the president coming forward saying this was a shellacking. He took it upon himself to say it was a shellacking, that he was the one shellacked, essentially. Is this the reform of the reformer, so to speak? Is the president now going to have the kind of willingness to work with the Republicans that Republicans at least say he hasn't had in his first 2 years?
Well, there's an argument about that. The Obama people would say that the president did attempt to work with them, and certainly the Senate leadership attempted to work with Republicans, but McConnell had decided that they were going to be the party of no, and that's what they did. So there was no possibility of any sort of compromise because the other side was not willing to compromise. Obama is going to have to try that again.
Well, and here's the question.
We'll see how far he gets.
Yeah, and here is the question we'll debate after this break, is the question of whether the president could be entirely reformed, and it could mean the restructuring, the re-engineering, really, of the entire administration, because he came forward and said that he took a shellacking. We'll discuss that and more right after this break.